That's super interesting because intuitively you would think, okay, we need to be super precise so we can get the AI to do exactly what we have in our mind's eye. But actually, just by keeping it a little bit more vague, we're just in a weird way, we're giving the artificial intelligence more room to be creative. Now that's weird.
Yeah, yeah, and like I've talked to actually a company which I started actually working with. So what they do, they have this AI model where you can upload your selfies, and the AI creates professional looking headshots, right? So I know this is like the biggest fear of people who are shooting headshots, that like now we're gonna have AI applications which can do that for us. And it was interesting because I invite the owner of this company to my podcast, and he was just like, "Are you sure you want to talk to me?" Because like we're getting so much backlash from photographers, and he was terrified that I'm gonna just like crucify him, online, talking about it. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm trying to understand what you guys doing, because this is the path, right? Like, it's a bunch of different companies which do the same thing what you guys doing, but I want to understand the process. So he jumped on actually on the podcast, and then we have an interesting conversation how they actually train this model, how they do this whole thing, and what they strive with. So it was fascinating conversation, and they actually invited me to join their team, and they're like, you know what, would you be interested to work with us? I'm like, sure, why not? Like it's I want to learn this stuff from the other end, right? But the one thing what he told me, one of the biggest struggles they had was pretty much the face expressions. That's something that the AI cannot really get the grasp, and then get the grip, and then they've been fighting with this for months and months, and then whatever data they put it in, it doesn't get it right. But one of the things also what he said to me, which was fascinating, that the AI is so, like, I don't want to say amazing in the terms of like, okay, so what he was trying to say is that if AI doesn't have an answer or doesn't know how to do certain things, it's gonna fill up the gap on its own, right? So they say, like, sometimes hit the jackpot, sometimes it's a total miss. But he's told me, like, we've noticed that AI, whatever there's a kind of room where it doesn't know what to do, it's gonna do it anyway, right? Doesn't matter it's good or bad, but it's gonna fill up the gap on its own, which was kind of also interesting how this technology works.
Yeah, so it's basically going to lie to you at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Unbelievable.
But human eye is pretty good when it comes to kind of recognizing what it's fake, what it's real. I think now the line is blurred, right? I think whenever I work with Chat GPT or other AI AI models who create images, I think now it passed that kind of goalpost where people can kind of recognize if this is real or not. Like, I know if there's a kind of weird concept, then yes, but in creating emotions,
Yeah.
it's completely different story.
Yeah, that's a weird thing about it. I know, I noticed that you sometimes with ChatGPT in particular, you have to tell it very specifically to either reference previous chats that you've had with it, which it can do, in order for it to not just make something up, but pull information out from somewhere from a conversation that you had previously,
Hmm.
you know, uh,
Absolutely.
and so it could, oh yeah, and for example, so one of the things, just to give you an example, like one of the things that I would do is, I would not typically what I'll do is I take an episode of the podcast and then I extract sections of it and I basically release them as standalone clips, which is a normal thing you do. And of course, because it's quite a lot of work, I basically use AI to analyze the content of this particular clip, and then I basically say, well, I can now create a title for this particular clip. Okay. And then what I've noticed early on was that sometimes the titles don't actually really represent what's being talked about in this particular clip. And so I'm thinking, well, this is weird. It's just made that title up because it thinks it's, I don't know, click worthy or something, right? That's bizarre. So I have to specifically prompt it and tell it, create a title based on the actual content of this clip. And then it does it. It's just like, okay, well, that title, you just made that up. You know?
Yeah. I think, that's gonna be the biggest, I don't wanna say challenge, but something that we're gonna have to learn is to communicating properly with AI. I know it's gonna
And
get
that's the
better, right?
that yeah, but that's the key.
But
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
what I've learned, even with, creating those images right now with ChatGPT. So generative fill backgrounds is a, completely, I would say, open space where you can just give AI just a general kind of ideas what you're going after and just let the AI kind of play with it, and the results you like, you can kind of use it. But Chat GPT, on the other hand, is completely opposite. Like, you have to be very precise, and even sometimes, one word can change everything. That's what I've learned, right? Like, creating those images. And but then again, you can just use it and refine it throughout the process, to kind of get the results you're looking for. But sometimes, for some of those images which I already created, the prompts were like very extended. Like, I was going for like the little detail I could find to make this image look the way I wanted. uh, which again, we've talked about it. This is completely different process of creating those images, but having the ability to kind of pinpoint certain elements and say, hey, this is what I want to change and make this better or adjust this, or I don't know, just, I don't know, do this way. It's fascinating process of creating those shots, because AI is not gonna just like, I don't know, spit something what doesn't look good. It's gonna kind of improve it and it's gonna look better. So you can really go not only any direction you want to go, but also, you can, the process, like, if, I think when people go to my blog, I'm gonna actually, I have one blog post where I'm showing the process where, where is the starting point image, the just the regular prompt which I've created, and then the process of how I actually improve the image through refining the prompt. And you have the first image and the last one is like a day and night, right? So it's like, a little bit like a photography. I know people gonna just kind of crucify me for this, but the same thing. When you work with clients, you working with lighting, you try to find specific posing, face expressions, and you just throughout this process getting into this image which you're looking for. And the same thing is when it comes to working with prompts. You're starting with just a regular idea, and then you just refine it throughout the process. You adding elements, you see the image. Okay, this is good. This is bad. Remove this. Add this. Okay, now I don't like this. Let's kind of completely switch and go different direction. So sometimes, as I said, it takes me hours and hours and hours go through this prompt and generating those results till the point where I'm satisfied with the final image. And also kind of similar scenario which I had with the backgrounds, that at the beginning I liked everything, and now I'm very picky, and I see what I like and I see what I don't like. And I've noticed it takes me more time to get where I want to go with those backgrounds. And exactly the same kind of process I see working with ChatGPT, that at the beginning I liked every image ChatGPT kind of spit out, and now I'm actually getting into this kind of place where I'm becoming very, very precise and specific. And then, like, it takes a lot of time to get to this kind of point where, I'm kind of satisfied and I like the image itself.
And what you've just described is actually just a perfect description of the creative process, just in general. Because, and I give 2 examples. Lighting is a really good example. Actually, general, photographic studio lighting or off-camera flash, if you want to call it that. When you first get into lighting and, you maybe get your first strobe, and your first softbox or a speed light and a softbox something, and you take a picture and you look at that and you go, "Whoa, that's amazing. Oh my god, that's incredible." And then you get into it, and of course, you over time, you start to craft the image, you start to get more specific about the position of your light, the angle, the height, the intensity. maybe even the color. Then you add additional lights, and now you're starting to craft that image. And every time you go through that process, because obviously every face is different, and every person is different, and you have maybe a different goal in mind, you go through this process of, doing something, evaluating it, going, I like this, or I don't like that, or maybe what if I just try this? You take another shot, you compare it, you go, oh, actually, no, I'll go back to this. This is a typical creative process. The same exact thing is true for music, right? When
Mhm.
you first start learning guitar and you learn chords and you start maybe writing your own music, you put two chords together and you go, whoa, this is amazing. This is cool. Perfect. And I actually, this is my own personal experience. When I was a kid, that's exactly what I did. I had I had a book, and I fancied myself as a songwriter when I was literally when I was just starting to play the guitars. I was like 7 or something, right? And I had this book, and I remember I used to write down song number 1, and it was E minor to G, because those were the 2 chords that I had learned by this point, and I figured that these 2 chords sound really good together. Awesome. And then song 2 was E minor, G, and D, because now I'd learned another chord, a D chord or something. Um, and of course, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, I'm in a studio and I'm crafting music, and, you go through lots of choices and you try things and you make, sometimes you let your intuition take over, or your instinct, sometimes, that, say, a guitar solo or something, you might just give it a chance and actually just allow you to be free and not be held back by too much planning, but just let it roll for a bit. And then, and so you become a lot more discerning, but also a lot more precise in a way, in the way that you achieve your end result. And of course, your end result is going to be much more complex, but much better in many ways compared to when you started. Same thing in lighting. You end up with images that are a lot more craft. I mean, now when I go through not necessarily a headshot session, but when I go through a portrait session, sometimes I create these images that God knows how many lights. Some are like bouncing into walls, some are bouncing into reflectors because I want to brighten these shadows a bit. It's a process that can maybe take a long time, but I can tune the image to exactly where I want it to be. Now, what you just described with prompting and reprompting and changing the prompt, and and developing that image is the exact same process. It's just a different medium and a different tool. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.